Welcome to Campus Insiders Oregon. I'm Jill Savage alongside Justin Myers, breaking down the latest BCS standings. Justin, Oregon, they got a little help from their friends. USC beat Stanford, so the Ducks now back in the top 5 of the BCS standings.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's going to be for very long, but Oregon's sitting now as the top one-loss team in the BCS. When you look out across the rest of the season, though, I still think Oregon's best chance is the Rose Bowl. That's where Oregon fans need to focus on. So much craziness needs to happen to get them back in the national title hunt. It looks close now being number 5, but you have to remember, being a one-loss team, you've also got Missouri, you've got Auburn, and you've got Michigan State all lurking there with chances against big top 4 opponents coming up. Oregon's only opponent in the top 5, they lost that game. So right now, Oregon, best case scenario, in my opinion, is the Rose Bowl.
What are some other opportunities for Oregon should they lose the Pac-12 championship game? Where do you see them heading?
I still think there's a chance that they could get an at-large berth in the BCS. You remember, Notre Dame with a couple of losses is going to be out of the BCS, and Fresno State still has to win out to get that non-AQ qualifier. But there's going to be, I think, one spot open as an at-large, and it could come down to a 2-loss Oregon team or a 2-loss Michigan State team, depending on what happens in the Big Ten. I still think Oregon's a big enough draw on TV that they could win the Pac-12 North, get into the Pac-12 championship game, lose, and still make a BCS bowl.
That's a big deal if you're an Oregon fan, to make it back into that BCS even with 2 losses. Now let's look at Oregon's game against Utah. Marcus Mariota, he turned into a bit of a pocket passer, and it's almost out of necessity, Justin, because he can't be that dual threat quarterback running the ball.
Well, a couple of things. I think the knee is a big issue, but most importantly, Oregon is trying to protect him. Now we're going to see what the Ducks do going forward with that big loss from Stanford. I mean, let's be honest. Back against Utah, Oregon didn't know if they were going to be in the Pac-12 championship race or have a shot at the Rose Bowl. Now that they know they're back in the driver's seat, they control their own destiny, I think you see the offense open up a little bit more with Marcus these next 2 games and the championship game if Oregon gets there. But I thought a nice adjustment by the Ducks, especially in the second half, transitioning to an offense that they haven't been running all year.
Scott Frost did say that he expects Marcus Mariota to be back at 100% for this week's game against Arizona, so that should be thrown out there. But looking at Oregon's run attack, they haven't had a 100-yard rusher since Marcus went down with that little knee injury that he had. So you look at what Byron Marshall and Thomas Tyner have been able to do in the last 2 games, it hasn't been as productive. So how concerned are you with Oregon's run game?
Not really concerned, because you saw Oregon able to adjust. Sometimes the run opens up the pass, and this is what Scott Frost said after the game. A lot of times, though, especially when you're facing Oregon, they're going to try to shut down the run, and the pass has to open up the run. And with this new, twist that they've put on the offense, not being able to run Marcus in the zone read, that changes the dynamic a little bit. So you have to be able to use play action, use the tight ends like Oregon did, especially in the second half, to loosen up the defense. And eventually you saw some running lanes open up. Also, I know that there was no true 100-yard rusher. Oregon splitting the carries. You're seeing DeAnthony, Byron Marshall, and Thomas Tyner all getting carries. If they would have had one guy getting all the carries, he would have had 100 yards.
What do you make of DeAnthony Thomas being back in his primary role?
Yeah, I like the move. They started the game out with DeAnthony Thomas in the slot and used him as a receiver. They motioned him into the backfield with Byron Marshall and also Thomas Tyner. I thought Tyner had some quality runs in the second half. This is the way to use DeAnthony Thomas. Special teams, hybrid role, get him out in space and make defenses prepare for him.
It's now time for Stock Watch. And Justin, before we take a look at all these games, I have to say, you said buy Baylor.
There you go.
Sell Stanford.
Sell Stanford.
You have one blemish on the year so far, but otherwise, you're doing very well
Not
this
too bad.
season.
So the pressure is on now. I say still continue to buy Baylor. They are 1/1000th of a percentage point behind Ohio State for that 3rd place spot, which is huge because we still don't know what Alabama's going to do against Auburn in the Iron Bowl and in the SEC Championship. I'm saying buy Baylor, sell Ohio State. I think Baylor gets the win over Oklahoma State. That's easily enough to bump them into the number 3 spot in the BCS.
That's really the only big game. Oregon at Arizona. We'll have much more of that coverage for you here on Campus Insiders Oregon throughout the week.